There. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bruce Langridge. I've talked to the Meadows group a few years ago. I came up to Pimpsite to give a talk. That was largely about meadow fungi as well. But I've been interested in fungi for many, many years, but I'm still no expert. I just want to let everyone know this. I'm not an expert. I'm a genuine enthusiast, and I help to manage land where we have meadows of international importance for fungi. And because of that, it's led me to want to learn more and more about fungi. But there are many people who know a lot more than me, so if I make any mistakes, just bear with me. But my talk tonight is really just to try and share my enthusiasm with you and just get you to go out and look a little bit more at the fungi. And just if you start to observe more, I think the more you start to observe, the more you start to notice. It kind of notices itself. Because before I got interested in fungi, which is kind of in the mid-2000s, I've got to say I hardly ever noticed fungi in meadows. And hopefully this tonight will just help you notice them a little bit more. And the illustrations I've got here are all photographs I've been taking over the years. So I'm no great photographer, but one thing I'm very prepared to do is get down on my belly and try and get a really good angle. So I've always got muddy, damp clothes from actually trying to take really nice photos of fungi. So hopefully you might enjoy those as I go along. And I'm starting off with one of my favorite fungi images, which is of something called Hygrocyber punicea. One of the wax caps. This is on the Black Mountain in Carmarthenshire, which is actually one of my favourite grassland fungi places. It's absolutely an amazing place because the grass is always nibbled low, and you can see an amazing amount of fungi on there. And there's a really nice little car park that you can pull in, and it is like being in a little wonderland. So just start you off with this one. But so I've got about 16 slides. I'm just going to go through them gradually. Maybe save the chapter later on if that's okay. And just a very quick intro again from where I am. So for those of you who know me, you'll know where I work. So I work at the National Botanic Garden of Wales. So that is just off the M4 in sort of southwest Wales between Carmarthen and getting towards Swansea and Llanelli. This is the whole site. It's 568 acres, and you can follow my little cursor here. This area here is a hillside of international importance for grassland fungi. It's the main reason I got into fungi, because I got a job at the Botanic Garden, which is this main bit here. And I had to, my job was to try and engage people about the collections of the Botanic Garden. And because I was told about this internationally important meadow, there weren't many people around to tell me much about it. So I had to go and look at it, find out about it. And I was just completely drawn in. And, but my focus is not just this meadow anymore, but right across this whole Windlass National Nature Reserve, as it's called. And indeed, across the whole of the Botanic Garden site here, I'm finding mushrooms, more and more and more mushrooms. And the more people I get to know who know about mushrooms, they point out things which I didn't even notice. And it's just such a wonderful world. And I think a lot of the fungi that I find is slightly a metaphor for great nature conservation. And that's one of the reasons I got so much into it. But I'll talk to you a little bit as we go along. This Splendid Wax Cap here was found actually on this site right about there. Actually, I've messed about with the pictures here, but there's a picture of the Great Glasshouse in the background. I've used it on lots of publicity, and it always goes down very well because people look at these fungi and they can't believe they really exist, or they can actually come and see them. Because a lot of people say, I've never seen anything like that before. But really, they probably walked and trod on them and not really noticed them before. So, but I want to give you a little bit of a personal history of why I'm interested in fungi, particularly meadow fungi. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the site as well. Sorry, I've got my order of slides there. So this whole site here is a organically farmed national nature reserve. And in this little bit of woodland here, there's lots of, oh no, it's here. There's lots of sort of scrappy things, but the farmer used to work down there, used to dump things in here. There's actually half a car in there. I think it was a Hillman imp. It's stuck into the ground. It's a very odd thing to find. But I also found one day this bag here of fertilizer. So this comes from the 1990s because there's been no fertilizer applied on the site since then. And we have a map on the site which shows where fertilizer had been applied in the 1970s. And that area, by and large, in all the time I've been there, has been very barren for grassland fungi. Whereas this fungi on the right-hand side, which is a fibrous wax cap, only occurs where there was no fertilizer applied in the 1970s. And this wonderful fibrous wax cap is one of over 10 species we have on our site, which are on the IUCN Red Data List. So the International Red Data List of rare biodiversity. We have 10 species in one field, which are of the conservation equivalent to having a polar bear, a snow leopard, a manatee, a European bison, a Sumatran orangutan. I mean, you imagine just having one of them in one of your site. It's quite amazing. We have 10 of these fungi just in one field alone. So one thing I want to give over today is that Wales is probably the best place to see wax caps in Britain. Britain is probably the best place to find wax caps in Europe, and Europe's best place in the world. So Wales, we have a great responsibility. We are custodians of land where we have something seriously species of world importance. We'll come back to that a little bit more. On our site, we use, we've been grazing the land for many years with different breeds of sheep. For a long time, we had clean sheep, which are those very heavy-footed, bit of a bully boys of the sheep world, who used to trample the land, and that trampling probably suppressed an awful lot of our fungi. Then we ended up with another breed called a Llanwenog, which are kind of a local Towy Valley breed with a little teddy boy haircut. But they were a little bit problematic to sort of to look after. Now we've moved into getting a flock of Balwin sheep. We have 60 of these Balwin sheep. They're a Towy Valley breed. They're wild as heck. We have a shepherdess called Rebecca who loves them to bits, but my goodness, she really struggles to get them to do whatever she wants them to do, because they really are pretty wild, and if there's a little gap in their fence, they'll go out. But we have a flock of 60 of these just to graze our meadow of international importance. And so it's lovely to, they've got little dainty feet, and which is good, and they're there's other aspects of them which we think are also very good for wax cap fungi. And as you can see on the right hand side, these are different types of wax cap fungi, so all these multicolored wonderful things. I'll talk about them a little bit more later. That's a collection from one field walk a few years ago. And this one on the bottom right is something called the honey wax cap, which smells of honey. And that's one of the things I can't give you on one of these talks tonight, is an idea of the smell of these things. Because in the middle here, there's a white wax cap. This is a snowy wax cap, but there's another one that smells of cedar. And again, it's only when you're actually in the field that you can really tell the difference. But anyway, I'm just giving you a flavour here. But we also have herds of Welsh black cattle. This fierce looking fella is in one of our fields where it's very damp, and we used to not realise that there were much mycological interest. Then one year, this fungus on the left-hand side, the golden spindles, appeared in like hundreds and hundreds of them appeared in this field. And then that really made us start to look, and then we started to see so much more in this field. And that's what a lot of fungi do. They alert you that something's underground, something curious is there, and that you need to keep going back to have a look. And that's what we do at the Botanic Garden. We keep going back to look. We're very lucky to have a group of volunteers, conservation volunteers. We have lots of eyes looking for us, and that's what you really want. And again, that may be a case that the more you look, the more you see. But over the last few years, we've been seeing so much more mycological interest. I think it might have a lot more to do with the fact that we're an organic farm, just as much as the fact we're having a lot more people looking. By the way, with my voice, I've had a cold for the last week, so bear with me. And as you can see here as well, you can see a hay bale. We have 5 fields over 30 acres of species-rich grassland, fields with hundreds or possibly thousands now of different types of different orchids, really rich botanical meadows, and that we've been converting into hay meadows over the last 20 years. And again, maybe it's a case that I'm looking properly, but when you cut your hay meadows, you often create short swaths of grass. And that actually helps you then notice fungi that you get on there. And I'm noticing more and more fungi on our hay meadows. This is one of our top hay meadows, top of the site. And last year it erupted with hundreds of ballerina wax caps, which is these beautiful pink beauties here, kind of called ballerinas because they've got like a pink top, and a leg, so it's like a ballerina's leg and tutu. Really amazing things. Once thought to be extremely rare, but so many people went out looking for them, not quite as rare as they thought they used to be. And we'll come back to that a little bit more. This is one of the species that first grabbed me as well. But these are called blackening wax caps or conical wax caps, and these occur in most of our lawns of the Botanic Garden. So all of our lawns, they've not had any fertilizer on them for over 20 years. Some of the lawns may well have been reseeded when the Botanic Garden was made. But these are one of the early colonizing wax cap fungi. And they're just amazing. I just look at the color of that. Look at this sort of texture of that one. And they transform in spectacular ways that once the raindrops hit them, they turn black. If you handle them with your fingers, they turn black before your eyes. So they kind of rapidly change. So this species here is the same as this one, which goes to this one here. And eventually it all becomes black with the white gills underneath. When you've got like guidebooks, when you're trying to work out what your fungi are, it can be devilishly hard sometimes when you've got this, which is also the same as this one. So your guidebooks, it's not easy. And one of the biggest barriers, I think, to people getting into fungi is trying to give a name to things, because it can be extraordinarily difficult. And the names keep changing, which makes it also difficult. And there's been an awful lot of DNA work being done on fungi, which is changing not only names, how they all relate to each other, but often the same things which look morphologically exactly the same are now being split into different types of species. It's getting harder, but which it concerns me a lot. It might be scientifically true, but I just don't want it to put people off. I've been one of those in the past. I tried to get to fungi. I used to be a botanist in the 1980s and 90s. I used to find fungi so hard, I just kind of gave up. I don't want other people to give up like I do. But again, this is why I'm doing this sort of talk, to show that you can still be very interested. Now I'm starting off this. This is not all about conservation. This is all about fungi that you get in meadows, but of course it all involves conservation. And I'm putting puffballs up because as a young lad, I used to live on sand dunes in Merseyside, and which had its own sort of grasslands, unimproved grasslands, which have built up over sand dunes. And we used to go out. I remember going out. I used to love jumping on the puffballs, puffing all the spores into the air. I can remember it now exactly where we used to go every year and find the puffballs, got very excited. We didn't know anything about them apart from they were called a puffball. And one thing I certainly didn't know is the Latin name Lycoperdon is actually, some taxonomists had a right good laugh with that one because it means wolf's fart. So so if you press on it, all the spores come up like a wolf's fart. I don't know what a wolf's fart's like, but if I was a little kid, I would absolutely love that. But there are 20 odd different types of puffball that you can get. Most of them you can get on our meadows. And on the right-hand side here, you see things called earth balls, which are sort of kind of related to puffballs, different families. But again, there's all different sorts. And this earth ball on the right-hand side, this is a photograph I only took last week. I was doing some family history research in Sussex. I was in a graveyard because graveyards are brilliant places for fungi. And next to this gravestone here, I found this little collection of earth balls. If you're trying to tell the difference between things like puffballs and earth balls, and you get a good fungi book, it's not that hard. It's one of the easier ones because there's only 20 to 30 of them, and you can get a good feel for what the difference might be. This is opposed to all the types of fungi. And whilst I was also in Sussex last week, it was absolutely full of what we could call a Garrickus fungi. So the ones that we eat from the shops, they're a Garrickus type. There's a lot of people go out collecting wild fungi, so what most people think tend to be a Garrickus. And you know what? I don't find that many in Wales. I really don't know. I mean, when I was in Sussex, I found absolutely loads. They're everywhere. But in Wales, I never really found that many. And where I do find them, they tend to be in the areas where I don't tend to find wax caps. Seem to just be different bits. So, but horse mushrooms, we have an area on the Wine where horse mushrooms appear fairly regularly. There must be mycorrhiza in the soil and they just keep coming up every year. And on the left-hand side here, you'll see Emily Ivans, who's one of our great members of our Carmarthenshire mycological community. And Emily helps us out every year. We run a UK Fungus Day at event at the Botanic Garden. And Emily and Stephanie and Emma, they bring samples with them so the public can see all sorts of different fungi. So Emily turned up this year with a giant puffball, gone over a little bit, but it's just one of the wonders, I think, of the world, as far as I'm concerned, to have fungi this big. And I don't often see a giant puffball. I've only seen it like half a dozen times in my life, so I'm always easily impressed if someone brings me something like that. Now, from being a child, I became like in my late teens and early 20s, the only fungi that I was interested in at the time was the magic mushroom. That was that for right or for wrong and whatever, but that was what got me interested. With a bunch of mates, we go out and try and collect them. And I know it's all very illegal, but it's actually got me out looking. So I was living near the Pennines at the time, and one of the things where we used to go out, we had all these other mushrooms that, oh, is that it? Is that it? Oh, I'm not sure if that's it. But it's a way that we all started talking about the land. It's actually got us really looking down on amongst the turf, looking at all the different types of other mushrooms that look like it. And so it's a way in, we all have different ways in. But to this day, I'm still always very interested in all those sort of little brown jobs, as we like to call them, which is we find in a lot of our certainly our meadows around here, or particularly our pastures. There's not that many of them. I'm sure a much better mycologist than I would be really, really on the case and find some really obscure ones. But working at the Botanic Garden, it's actually really good that we sometimes come in contact with someone like some of the UK's leading mycologists. And we've got a library now of Roy Wattling. So a few of you may well know Roy Wattling, been largely based up in Scotland, written many books, hugely respected mycologist. He's giving his library to the National Botanic Garden in Wales. So Roy's been down a few times with his van, bringing down his books, and he's come with a friend of his called Mike Henderson, who is actually one of the UK's leading dung mycologists. And he calls himself the crap mycologist. That's his little tagline. Funny chap. And but really, really interesting. So when we're seeing all these sort of like fungi that are around the magic mushrooms, a lot of them are related to dung. A lot of them, just showing you what they look like on here. But Mike told me a few years ago, he said that there's less and less of them because a lot of our animals having all sorts of chemicals put into the feed, and those chemicals are making less and less dung fungi. And so you might think, well, what's the consequence of that? But all these fungi all have a function. There's all sorts of probably creatures that we just can't even comprehend have a relationship with these. So I think this is a bad thing that there's less and less of them. And probably just a sign that maybe sometimes our farming isn't helping. But it's usually if you go out, you want to see other things. I just want to point out as well, if you look at the top left-hand corner, there's a type of fungi there called Mycena. And I love these because of the name of them. If you are interested in ancient Greece, they're called bonnets, by the way. That's the sort of common name. But if you're interested in ancient Greece, the reason they're called Mycena is that the shape of them, that has a little, what we call an umbo, a little raised area in the middle here. It's a very common term. I can see this on the magic mushroom over here. Little umbo here. There's an umbo there. And the shape, sort of dome shape of a lot of Mycena, they look like the helmets of the ancient Mycenaeans. So if you're interested in the Battle of Troy, it's Agamemnon and his crew. They were from Mycena. So I love the way some of these fungi have been given these really, really obscure names for very strange reasons. Anyway, but this, and on the right-hand side, this magic mushroom here, this is, we get it, you know, we get it all across this area of Wales. A lot of you have land, you'll probably have it on there. It tends to like sheep grazed area, or at least cut areas. It's often found in areas with very poor botanical interest. But this was found in our double wall garden. I once gave a guided tour about myths and legends of fungi, and it's a bit of a fun tour really. And on the day of the tour, I walked past this lawn. I noticed there was hundreds of these magic mushrooms had appeared. Never seen them there before, hardly seen them since. Found this little caterpillar crawling its way up there. So I gave him a tour. Somebody picked one, asked me what it was. And of course, I had to give them the happy information that they just broken the law. They picked a Class A drug, which gave them immediate horror. But anyway, we all had a bit of a laugh about that. But I came back the next day and everyone had gone. So I think someone from the tour will probably come back. Anyway, so I'm going to show you why I like wax caps. So as I said before, one of the pleasures of the job that I've had is that if I'm going to excite people about the collections that we have at the Botanic Garden, I have to get to know them. So I found this the hillside with these on, and these are Splendid Wax Caps here, Scarlet Wax Caps. Just look at the colour. I mean, now it's extraordinary. What an extraordinary thing to see. And I'm someone who's walked across. I've gone for walks all my life. I've gone on walks all on Pennines and upland areas. But I never noticed them until I came to the Botanic Garden. I think I must have just not noticed them. And I don't know how. But I really don't know how, because I would have walked past things like this. And this might be the same for you. So, but once you do start to notice, my God, you notice, and it gives you lots of headaches trying to work out the difference between a a Splendid Wax Cap and a Crimson Wax Cap and a Scarlet Wax Cap, and also there's quite a few different red ones. But my God, it's worth the effort, because you really, once you get the book out, you really start to look closely. You look at the colour of the stipe, you look at the fringes of the cap, you feel the texture. There's all sorts of things it makes you do. It's a bit like an artist drawing something. The more you have to look, the more you then see, and actually then the more you really do appreciate what you're looking at. I also want to point out on the bottom left-hand corner here of this Scarlet Wax Cap, you can see some moss. This is a feathery moss, and I'm going to point out feathery moss again. You can see feathery moss actually next to this Splendid Wax Cap on the right-hand side here as well. Can we see any more? There's a little bit of moss down there. So, and these are all the wax caps that we get at the Botanic Garden. This is a citrine wax cap on the left-hand side. Yet another species like the Splendid Wax Cap we just looked before, which is also on the IUCN Red Data list of threatened species in the world. This is a spectacularly good year for citrine wax cap. I was chatting to Andrew before the talk here. It's just been a really, really good year for wax caps. No, for fungi all over the place. And many of our wax caps are coming out in places, again, we haven't seen them in mass before. We've got one of our hay meadows, and there are hundreds of citrine wax caps on there only yesterday. I think they're citrine wax caps, and check. But even the meadow wax cap on the right-hand side here, these are much more common. My God, look how glorious they are. We have sometimes there are meadows that we have with hundreds and hundreds of these on, and they're very, very durable. Some of the wax caps, they come and they go very quickly, but the meadow wax cap stays with us for a very long time. And when you're giving a guided walk like I am, I often do, I often get a bit anxious because wax caps can be very fickle and can be there one day and not there the next. So if I see some meadow wax caps, I always think at least something to look at. And on the left-hand side of this one, we've got a fibrous wax cap. This is from Greencastle Woods on the road to Llan Steffan. This was actually a walk with Leslie Naturalist probably over 10 years ago, just showing the virtue of local societies actually giving walks, because one of the best things you can do is just walk out and just be able to touch and smell and have someone to tell you a little bit about your walk. This is the first time I ever saw a fibrous wax cap. Philip Jones was running the walk, and I've learned an awful lot of Philip Jones over the years. He's been a real inspiration, and I think he's left a lovely legacy from decades of running walks in Carmarthenshire. Philip's getting on a little bit now, so he doesn't run the walks, but he's certainly helped me when I was first getting into fungi generally. On the right-hand side here, we see the Parrot Wax Cat, which has been a bit slow in fruiting this year, but I suddenly found quite a lot of them yesterday. And look at this one, it's kind of a green and yellow one, but it's called a Parrot Wax Cat because it has sometimes the whole colours, like a scarlet macaw. All sorts of colours are on there. And I once asked a question on Radio 4 about why are fungi coloured? What is it? What is their ecological reason to be coloured? And no one knew. It's one of these sort of programs, sort of ask the expert. And I don't think I've found anyone since who actually knows the reason. It seems that they make. Well, I don't know. It'd be interesting for you to maybe comment on that later on. But some of the colours are just so mind-bendingly gorgeous. There's not a colour to say, don't eat me, I'm poisonous. There just seems to be no particular rhyme or reason for it. But for us as human beings, we can really enjoy the colours of them all. And the Parrot Wax Cap is one of those that used to be considered one species and now considered to be several different species, which quite frankly blows my mind. I'm just calling it the Parrot Wax Cap for the time being. Yeah, just gorgeous though. And if you're getting into wax caps, you also it's important that you also go for the ones that are less showy. So we have on the left-hand side, we have something called Hygroscyba irrigata, Again, this is one of the more unusual ones. This I found in a cemetery over near Velindre, Carmarthenshire. Once you start to get into things like wax caps, and they're kind of good to get into because there's only 50 or 60 different types in the UK. So you've got a bit of a good chance of having a good run up and having a good guess on what they might be. Often it requires examination of spores through microscopes. So that's not, if you really want to be 100% sure what you're looking at, that's not for everybody, obviously. And this yellowfoot wax cap is one that I think we only recorded on Wine Lass for the first time about 5 or 6 years ago. Never very common, but is also on the IUCN red data list. And the heath wax caps, this was also from the same churchyard in Velindre. I'm so excited being in that churchyard. So many interesting things. Yeah. Now, this is a picture I took of the National Botanic Garden in Wales, just under the Science Centre yesterday. I've been chatting to Emma Williams. She is possibly she is Wales's leading mycologist, I'd say, or one of the leading mycologists in Wales. She knows so much. She tells me so much and I forget half of it. But one thing she's really impressed upon me is that mosses, feathery mosses, are almost always found with wax caps. So we've got, whilst they've always been considered just a meadow species, they're often found in woodland now, but where they're found in woodland, there's always feathery moss to go with it. People aren't really sure why that is. It used to be, they thought maybe the wax caps are feeding on the decayed remains of the mosses, but that might not necessarily be true. They might be having a mutually beneficial relationship with each other. That's not been discovered yet, but they are in the same place. So if you are doing a wax cap survey, again, this is what Emma's passed this on to me, really good advice. Almost just tread on the site, feel the bounce in your feet. If you feel no bounce, there's no moss there, you're probably unlikely to ever see wax caps. And this might be a real interesting issue if we were trying to create wax cap habitats in the future, because no one also knows how to get spores from a wax cap and make it grow. It's just one of those dark arts. It's a bit like alchemy. No one really knows, but it'd be very interesting. Maybe one of the ways that you can maybe attract wax caps onto your land is to try and encourage the mosses to grow. How do you do that? I've no idea either. Maybe someone can tell us that later on. But again, this is a blackening wax cap, as you can see on the left-hand side. I just thought this was a nice illustrative image. And this is a cemetery up in Llansadwn on the road to Llandovery. It's a cemetery with virtually no mycological interest, apart from in front of this gravestone, which was dedicated to a woman who died in the 1920s. And I did a cemetery, a fungi and cemetery survey of Carmarthenshire cemeteries in 2013. Went and visited loads of cemeteries. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed doing that. And I just ended up in the cemetery, looked around, found absolutely nothing. But until I was found right in front of this cemetery, this gravestone, I found earth tongs. See this one on the left-hand side? This is like one of the fungi that really blew my mind. They look like just black tongs coming out the ground. There's several different types. They're all sort of probably identifiable through a microscope, but they're really kind of not as common. They're one of the more unusual types of fungus. And not only them, but I also found different types of wax cap, and I found some spindles as well, all just in that little bit, just in front of the gravestone. And I went into the church. I signed the book there to let them know about this. But then I got chatting to a local person who thought it was a man was tending the grave for many years, because whereas the rest of the graveyard, they used to just cut the grass, leave the arisings, which kind of kept the nutrient levels quite high. But this man used to come and clear away the arisings from in front of this gravestone year after year. He kept it really, really, really tidy. And I think his axe had created a little ecosystem for Grassland Fungi. Absolutely amazing. And I did a Living World radio program in 2011 on Radio 4 with Gareth Griffiths from Aberystwyth University, who's one of the probably Mr. Wax Cap. It was certainly Britain's big expert in wax caps. And we did a program and we came to this actual gravestone, and I brought the presenter here, and I couldn't believe it. The fungi were actually there. They'd returned from the year before. So excited. So that's on the interwebs to listen to. I was talking about different types of spindles. There are different types of, this one here is an illustration of a club fungus, which are these kind of yellowy or beige or white, like fingers coming out the ground. These are really important grassland fungi as well. Sometimes in great numbers, sometimes really hard to find, very hard to predict. The crown jewel of these, though, is probably the violet coral fungus, which is Clavarius elungeri. And this, I found a huge colony again in the same churchyard in Dravat-Velindre. Absolutely loads and loads of it. But it's one of the really, probably more, we could probably properly call rare fungi. I found a little bit once in Abergorlech Cemetery, not found it again. But this is, to me, this is just one of the most outstanding, amazing coloured, and just the whole form of this fungi is amazing. And Plant Life paid for us to make a little film about it a few years ago. Using as a young girl, we gave a guided tour on, me and Isabel Macho, the biodiversity officer for Command. We gave a guided tour here a few years ago, and these people turned up, and one of them, the daughter, she was only about 7 or 8 or something, and she knew all the names in Latin of fungi. It was so inspiring. So we made a little film about this with her. It's probably a teenager now. Anyway, so moving on from the wax caps, there are so many different other types of fungi they get in meadows, and I'm only giving you just a few little pointers to what interested me over the years. So again, when I started getting into fungi, I kept seeing these fungi everywhere, which kind of were very large, and they had these gills which kind of ran down the stem, and a kind of a funnel type shape to them. And what do you know? They're called funnel fungi, and there's quite a few different varieties of them. And this is just one example of a tawny funnel making a fairy ring. This is, I think, is in Court Henry. I used to live in Court Henry, so that's where I used to really try to learn about all the different types of fungi when I first got to them. And at the top here, there's a little plate of a Clytocybe fragrance, so it's more of a scented one. Just give you an idea, this is what we do for a fungus day. When people bring things in, we put them on little plates or tables, and we make just little labels about them so people can come and see all different varieties. But funnels are good, you know, if you're trying to get into fungi. They're a nice place to start as well, because there's only so many in the book you can have a go at, and they're very large, and they have features you can actually see when you've got poor eyesight like me. So give them a go. And this, I couldn't believe this. When I first got into fungi, you kind of, you know, you can start buying the books, get really excited by it. You see things you think, well, I'll never see that. That's just weird. And hey presto, they start to appear where I work. So this is a scarlet caterpillar fungus, the cordyceps. These are fungi which emerge from the head of creatures that are living in the ground, mainly caterpillars or different larvae. And you can see on the left-hand side, some poor critter here. I can't identify it, but the caterpillar fungus has come out of its head and just poked itself out on the ground. And it's just like really weird to actually have these on our Welsh countryside. And even the colours of these cordyceps are pretty weird. This is another one I found. It's the same species, but it looks pretty damn different from the other one. But just amazing. It's very hard to predict where they are. You just have to keep looking, or you start looking for other things and you find these by chance. But I'll tell you, the one thing to notice there, also lots of feathery moss nearby as well. Don't know if that means anything. And I've also, whilst I've been talking about other grassland fungi, which are of importance, we also have a whole set of fungi called pink gills. Latin is called Enteloma. We've had the fairy ring appear in one of our hay meadows, our Trouscoid hay meadow. And I noticed fairy ring of this many years ago. I love fairy rings, and I was chatting to Professor Lynn Boddy about it from Cardiff University. Again, it's one of the prime mycologists in the world. I think we should be very proud that she's based in Cardiff. She helped us set up the UK Fungus Day, really important person, and then came to the Botanic Garden, did another Radio 4 programme on fairy rings, and she actually based it on this fairy ring, which has appeared again this year. Doesn't appear every year, and I think it's getting bigger and bigger, and we've now got two little smaller fairy rings in the same meadow nearby. Now, this species is also on the IUCN Red Data list of threatened species. But again, tell you, I'm not an expert, and I've been chatting to Emma Williams again, and she said entelomas, the way that they are named and arranged is going to be changed dramatically because of a lot of recent DNA study. And she actually said you've got to rip the book up and start again. But just for the time being, I'll just stick with me lilac pink gill, be happy with that one. And maybe next year we'll have another conversation about it. But fairy rings, I think, are just phenomenal things. We have found 6 meter wide fairy rings of Splendid Wax Cap on our Wax Cap meadow, the one that is particularly of international importance for us, where we've found probably high 30s different types of important grassland fungi. So again, I spoke to Gareth Griffiths years ago about the growth rates of fairy rings, of wax caps. He tried measuring one of the meadow wax cap of somewhere near Aberystwyth, and he said they were expanding about 1 millimetre a year. So you think, my God, how old's a 6 metre wide one? But what we don't know is how quickly they drop the spores and then expand, and then they probably settle down and then move about 1 millimetre a year. So we don't really know. But something which is 6 metre wide, fairy ring, likely to be extremely old, and something that we really, really ought to treasure and really need to conserve. We do not want to be interfering with these things. They might be older than our oldest tree. We don't know, but let's not play about with it. Let's conserve it whilst we can. Moving on to Parasol Fungus. This is another one that when I first got into fungi, I used to see on sea cliffs all around. I love walking on the sea cliffs of Wales, and I kept seeing these Parasol Fungus everywhere, with distinctive sort of round tops which flatten out, and a snake skin stem. And this photograph comes from only a month ago. Again, this is near Llansadern. There's a fields nearby. A circular walk around there, and I found them on the same field 3 years in the trot. This is I'm here with a friend of mine. We've been enjoying nature together for 40 years. She's an ecologist from Sheffield, so I love being able to show this off. And we have a field in the Botanic Garden, with only one field that we regularly have Parasol Fungus in, and they come back every now and again. So there must be, whatever the conditions are, I don't really know, but it's not heavily fertilized. I love these. And we also at the Botanic Garden also have lawyers' wigs, or different types of coprinus or ink caps. At the moment, these lawyers' wigs are actually fruiting at the moment, but someone keeps cutting them down to eat, I'm sure. You won't tell me who it is. And that's one of those big issues, we have in the mycological world, certainly from a botanic point of view. We don't really want people picking them. We want visitors to enjoy them. And what we really want people to see is that these beautiful, amazing fungi, when they turn to black goo, and this is one of my favorite words in nature, they deliquesce into this black goo, an amazing part of nature. But again, these seem to repeat in the same sort of places. there are different types of ink cap. For those of you tempted to eat it, beware some of them, if you drink alcohol at the same time, it will make you very ill. But again, they're a type of fungi. If you get an ID book, there's not that many. Maybe they are sort of doable. So again, if you're trying to get into aspects of fungi, it's often wise to sort of choose a group and really make a bit of an effort on that. And once you get to know one group, it then makes it a little bit easier to learn another group. When I'm out looking on grasslands as well, there's often other things that you see. This earthy powder cap, Cystoderma, I often found it really close to wax caps. Again, you can see all the feathery moss nearby. And then you sort of notice other things which you think, oh, is that a wax cap? And then you find out they're called bell fungus, Gallerina. There's quite a few different types of them as well. Aren't they gorgeous? Love it. If you're lucky, we often say that the only sort of meadow, pink meadow fungus you get is the ballerina. But you often get this thing called the lilac bonnet, also Mycena. They're in woodland, but you also get them in grasslands as well, which I think are amazing. And last year, I found loads of these things called Bolbeatus titubans, the yellow field cap. Absolutely amazing sort of fungus, which starts off looking absolutely like a huge, tasty lollipop, and within a day can sort of fade into sort of nothing beiginess. But if you find them fresh, they look amazing. And again, very hard to identify though, because of the variety of shapes and colours they can exhibit. But when you see them fresh like this was on Carreg Souther. There's a common land up at Llangadog, a really good place to look for wax cats. And one of the first places I went on a wax cat walk which was led by Penny David, who a lot of you may have heard of, who again, she led a walk in about 2006, which went on. Massively important for me, just to see how walks are done, to see how the variety. I just noticed so much after that walk. So I'm very grateful for her and her help over the years. And I'm going to point these out as well. On the left-hand side, I mean, we tend to associate fungi coming out in autumn, but there are springtime fungi. One's called the miller, and I found this a few times on our pastures on Wine Lass. So when you find a gilled white fungus in springtime, that really narrows it down. There's a St. George mushroom, which you can also find. But again, when you're trying to identify things, there's not that many come out in spring. So the miller is a bit of an easy one. And of course, I've got to put this on because I absolutely adore this. This is not a fungus. It's a slime mold, but it's kind of as near to a fungus as we get. And I look at the name, dog sick slime mold. This occurs a lot on our Wine Lass National Nature Reserve, often on the just the grassy, more improved areas where we've got lots of ryegrass or Yorkshire fog. This slime mold, which is composed of single cell creatures which all get together and move around and eat and mate and then turn to powdery dust. Just amazing. And they do look like dog vomit sometimes. Fascinating thing. And just a couple of other weird ones as well. If you go near Carrick-Kennan on the hillsides up there, I once found a whole field full of these Alluria, these orange cup fungus, all on the grass. It just looked like someone had a furious orange eating party and chucked all the orange peel everywhere. It was just the most bizarre sight. I didn't have my camera that day, so this was from another bit. But again, weird things that you can find on your meadows. And on the left-hand side here, we have the black fungus of the ergot, Claviceps. This is the thing which I've sent people mad over the years, which has got into rye, which has got into bread, which has made people act very strangely, which may well have led to accusations of witchcraft over the hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's one of those things I thought, well, that's I'd read about in a book. But I remember one of our previous directors of the Botanic Garden, Rosie Plummer, she'd done, I think, PhD into this sort of fungus, and just walked out with it. And she found it within like 10 minutes of walking around, just on a bit of ryegrass near our great glass house. Couldn't believe it. Amazing. So ergot's still around. So I've not even gone into rusts and smuts, because that is another area of fungi interest, which is really important that you all get into. But quite frankly, I haven't got any photographs about it, and I don't know enough about it to talk about. But just let you know, there have been red data lists being produced by the likes of Nigel Stringer and Ray Woods and Debbie Evans, and a clutch of really dedicated Welsh mycologists who have made these lists of the rarer types of rusts and smuts, and possibly there's nowhere else in the world with better records of such things. I wish I could speak better about it. And I just want to have a final slide here, because one thing I love is inspiring other people to be involved. So we've got an image here. This is one of the meetings of our Carmarthenshire Biodiversity Partnership. Came to look at for wax caps once. I always love it the way that people just always on the haunches looking down and all this sort of thing. It's always a good day out when people are on the floor. And but I've also really loved the fact we have a group of people who love stitching and making representations of the collections of the National Botanic Garden in Wales. So we have a Stitching Botanicals group, and they've done displays and exhibitions on fungi. And this is just a collection of 4 out of over 100 that have been depicted and shown there, and people are still making them to this day. And it's one of the best ways we can do public engagement, because the people who do the stitching here, some of them have maybe had no interest in fungi before, but they've had to really research this, look at it, create things, and they then have taken up an interest. So I'll stop my chat for now, and I'll stop sharing, Andrew. Oh, Andrew, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bruce. That's really good, and your voice held out.
Thank you very much.
Right, anyone who would like to unmute yourselves, get your camera and your sound working with the buttons bottom left of your screen. Can
I just ask, does anyone have any idea how to encourage moss onto your land?
Anybody?
You think it'd be an easy thing that you think that someone would know, really, but no.
Moira says she already has moss.
We have moss, but sometimes if you've got a grassland which doesn't have any moss, there must be a way of trying to encourage moss. We're very good at doing wildflower seeds now. We do green hay, and I think the green hay can really help, I think, with mosses. But I don't know how else you do it.
No, I don't know really. No. Ellie suggests possibly raising acidity.
I don't Ellie, I don't know how to do that. Well, but do you know what the thing is with the wax caps? You find them in calcareous and acid areas, so it's not. I don't think it's an acidity issue.
Annette suggests might be worth analysing the soil and then replicating it elsewhere.
Very good, and we've got one of our scientists at the Botanic Garden, Dr. Laura Jones. She's actually doing research into the biota and fungi of soils in our wax cap meadows, and we're hoping to get data on that in a few months. Moira, there is a local fungi group. Oh, I can hear like a ghost in you. There is a Carmarthenshire fungus group. If you are, they have a Facebook page. So if you go into Facebook, put Carmarthenshire fungus group on there, and you'll see all sorts of things going on. I'd recommend you to join it. It's a really nice way just to get to know the local people and to sit. Often people post things, images of fungus, which have just come out, which might have just suddenly come out in Newcastle Emlyn, but have also suddenly come out in Llanelli on the same day. And that's always amazing when you suddenly discover that two people are sharing the same passion at the same time across the geographical divide.
Isabel posted on the chat that violet coral fungus was in the same churchyard as your slide a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, she's been back, has she? Oh, right. That's great. It's called Penboyer. I would really, it really is in kind of an, well, I live in Llandilo, therefore it becomes an obscure place. If you live around there, it's probably very common. It's a wonderful, wonderful churchyard. One of the best I've ever seen. Encourage people to go.
A question from Laura. Do the wax caps with strong aromas have a greater reliance on invertebrates to help with spore dispersal?
Well, I've got absolutely no idea. It's funny. Maybe it's like colour. I mean, you get the stink horns. You know, I mean that they attract flies to take away their spores. So I can see that one. It's one of the beauties of fungi, which I absolutely adore. That no one really knows. There's so much more to discover. That I mean, ecologically, we kind of like got a mindset of thinking things occur ecologically for a reason. I mean, maybe we're anthropomorphizing too much, but it's kind of what I think. And so there must be a reason for all these things, but we haven't worked it out. When I asked my question on radio 4 years ago, one of the panelists said, oh, I think it's something to do with radioactivity, which I thought was a bit of an easy cop out in a way. But I kind of like the idea of it because there's all the mycelium in the ground getting a bit closer, you know, because the radioactivity levels are a bit higher in the soils. But I don't know if that's complete nonsense.
Certainly, at our place anyway, I've been going around looking at all the fungi that are coming up at the moment, and a day later, most of them are half eaten away by slugs. So slugs certainly consume them.
They do, and you also see crows knocking them off because the crows know that the slugs inside the fungus as well.
Yeah,
we often go around wagging a finger at the sheep for like knocking them down, but I think there's probably other things operating. Haven't I bet the squirrels get seen.
yes,
squirrels eating things.
Yes.
So we've got loads of squirrels, obviously.
Yes.
So I imagine the badgers probably sniff them out. There's probably all sorts of things we just don't know. We could do with some sort of like big sort of cameras at night, intensive study on a wax cap field. I
did read the other day that someone discovered in Finland that red squirrels deliberately forage on a certain type of some amanita, I can't remember what it was, and they also store them up in crooks in tree branches, and they arrange them so they'll dry out and are well preserved, and they feed on them over winter.
Well, I probably said this to you before, Andrew, but I don't know if I said it to everyone else. But Ray Woods, one of the great mycologists of Wales, once informed me that he'd read that the spores of wax caps have been found in the flesh of ribwort plantain, and they've also been found in the flesh of mistletoe. So what the heck are they doing up by the mistletoe? Could that be squirrel action? I don't know. Just one of those things. You think, what? Because because no one can actually grow wax caps from the spores. Clearly, something has to be. There has to be something going on. Maybe like a bird eating a seed and it's going through their gut. Maybe there's something like that going on somewhere. Maybe through the slug. I don't know. Not a clue.
Mary's pointed out that there's a very good guide to wax caps in West Wales, published by the Pembrokeshire Fungus Recording Network.
Yes, really good. They're brilliant over there. That's David Harris, and who runs the group over there. They've been absolutely fantastic at doing really great research, and they've really helped to pioneer fungus groups doing DNA barcoding work as well. they're really ahead of the game. It's wonderful what they've done. And the guidebook they produce is really, really invaluable. Plant Life do really good guides as well. And Plant Life, they give them away for free at certain events. So there's a lot more interest in things like wax caps over the last 20 years. Again, fungi, when I was doing, I used to be a field botanist in the 1980s, and no one gave a monkeys about fungi at the time. It's just not even thought about as a conservation issue. I think it's only the probably late 90s that it started to become more and more important. And again, I think with all the sort of new books like people like by Merlin Sheldrake and all this, we get an awful lot more interest now in people understanding that fungi can tell us a lot about the interconnectedness of nature. And that's the bit I absolutely love. Yeah. Because I don't obviously know all the names of everything, but I know that we just need to treat nature well, and fungi are helping us to learn that. And I thank them for
that. While we're talking, we just mentioned that Pembrokeshire Guide to Wax Cats. There's also this book, which is actually produced by the Monmouthshire Meadows Group. So this isn't
got the same one, Andrew.
Yeah,
got the same one. Brilliant book.
Snap. Yeah. So that's not just wax cats; it's loads of different genera of grassland fungi.
Yeah, and I know there's a thing there about painting as well. That there's, but the Botanic Garden has commissioned last year Julianne Sheridan, who is a really great artist from Llangadog. She did an exhibition on lichen for me once not for me, but for the Botanic Garden a few years ago. But she does online courses about how to draw and paint wax caps. So if you put in, I think she did just wax cap Julianne Sheridan, you'll get a wonderful half-hour tutorial about the sort of paints you should use, the brushes you should use. It's absolutely fantastic. Free resource.
Yeah. Emma Williams has commented on the moss question, how to encourage moss. And Emma says,
go on.
Avoid heavy footfall on the ground. Don't use herbicide. Many lawn treatments contain moss killer. No liming of the ground, which is the technique used in agriculture to cut down on moss to raise grass nutrients. They're the first pollinizers of bare ground. So moss will turn up if you do nothing to deter it.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
And she says the best field book for beginners and enthusiasts is the Collins Complete British Mushrooms and Toadstools, the essential photographic guide to Britain's fungi.
Great. And Emma knows what she's talking about. And Emma, I didn't know about liming. There's an interesting one. We had a conversation with someone else about liming some while ago when we were talking about looking after our wildflowers in our meadows. That's really interesting what you say there, because that we wouldn't want to be doing that on parts of our meadows where we have wax caps. Yeah. So learning all the time. I always learn all the time, and I'm sure we've probably made mistakes before, but we'll share those mistakes and keep on learning.
Comment from Fiona and Julian Wormold. Two brilliant books on fungi out in the last year: Merlin Sheldrake's Entangled Life, which you just mentioned, and Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard.
Oh, don't know that.
I've not heard of that one.
Okay. Well, I'll look into that. Thanks. Thank you both.
And another book I'm reading at the moment, I've borrowed, is this one by Pat O'Reilly. It's not an ID guide alone. It's got a huge amount of information in it, as well as information on individual species, but a lot of background and ecology and how fungi are interconnected with other living things like trees.
Well, if you, Pat also has a website, First Nature website.
Yes.
Has astonishingly good notes about certain types of fungi. Really, like, almost for me, it's a bit of a go-to thing because it also gives me stories. She also talks about the etymology of the names, who named them, why they named them. Huge respect for Pat, and he's run lots of great walks for us in the Botanic Garden in the past. He's really helped me as well. And I've read every word of that book. I couldn't put it down when I got it.
Emma's just commented, Pat's book is brilliant, and he writes with wit, so it's fun too. Yes,
yeah, absolutely. Top geezer.
Where are we? Stella says, apart from eating, are fungi used for any other purposes, like pigments?
Well, the ink caps used to be used for writing ink. It's I'm not sure how much else. I mean, I bet Emma probably knows a lot more than I do about this. I mean, well, obviously, recreational drug side is been important for people. But I'm not really sure. I know we have some dyers, DYEERS, who come in the Botanic Garden, who I think have tried to use some fungi. Funny enough, crottal lichen is better, is an effective thing for staining things brown, used for Harris Tweed. That's probably the fungal constituent is doing that. But I don't know. I'm sure other people know better than I will.
Moira asked, can you say again the name of the artist you mentioned?
Yeah, it's Julie Ann Sheridan.
Julie Ann Sheridan. Thank you.
If you go into if anyone here knows Gadog, it's the if you just go out of the village, just slightly go out of the village past the medical centre, opposite there's a thing called the Last Gallery, little art gallery and furniture repair place, and that's where she operates from. But she's really, really good. She doesn't talk down to you, she just talks levelly at you, and she's fantastic at it. She's done the ballerina as well. She's done, oh God, I've forgotten what it is, but she's done about 12 different types of film, including wildflowers. Really good.
Question here, roughly when is the fungi day at the Botanic Gardens? Well, it was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're very proud that we started a Wales Fungus Day in 2011, which we had an exhibition from Edinburgh Botanic Gardens called From Another Kingdom. It was the first major fungi exhibition in the UK. We hired it off them. We got our grant from Welsh Government to bring it down to our Great Glass House. It was in there for a few years, and when we put it in, Professor Limbody came over, helped us do it, and we talked to her, and we thought we need to have something to mark this. So we thought we'd do a sort of like multi-event day aimed at different groups called Wales Fungus Day. And it went down a treat. It was really, really popular. Lots of people turned up, lots of people eager to know, lots of people with no knowledge, just keen to know. And we did that for a few years. And then Lynn became the president of the British Mycological Society. And then she managed to create a UK Fungus Day on the back of the Wales Fungus Day. And so we have our Fungus Day pretty much on the same day as UK Fungus Day every year. I had 2 years where our head of events actually organised an Antiques Weekend on the same day, which I wasn't too happy about. So we had to have it on a different day. But generally, I think it's wonderful that across the UK, there are now, I think one year there were over 80 different places doing an event for UK Fungus Day. And Lynn is now on the charge to create a World Fungus Day. So if a World Fungus Day appears one day, this has all started in Wales. Again, as I'd say, in Wales, we should be extraordinarily proud, and we should take great responsibility for what we have as grassland fungi. It's something the whole nation should be proud of. And hopefully what Lynn's doing is helping that happen.
Maybe it's a sort of positive side effect of having a lot of medium-sized animals grazing the grass down every.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, all the sheep we've got, you know, in some ways it's had an effect on a lot of the botany of Wales. It's had a detrimental effect on that. But on the flip side, it's actually the reason why we've probably got so much wonderful wax cap meadows. You know, when you get wax caps all across the UK, but Wales is a real stronghold of it. And that could be because of our damp climate. Obviously, that's going to help, isn't it? But I think it's just the sheer volume of area that we've been grazing for hundreds of years now seems to be paying off in us having such an amazing soil habitat.
Comment from Emma again, going back to the dye question.
Yeah.
There are several species of Cortinarius and bracket fungi used for natural dye, but she says many are rare species, so she doesn't promote them, but historically they're interesting.
Well, I'd also say there's probably only Emma could actually identify them anyway, so that's an easy one. There's another one I forgot about as well, Emma, which was we have a fellow from Llangadog called James who actually grows turkey tails fungi for the market in Japan. Because turkey tail fungi are used in Japan to boost immunity for people who have been receiving treatment like for cancer. So when their immunity is low, they give them the turkey tail concoction. And so it's amazing that we've got someone in Llangadog actually growing them for Japan. But in Britain, we don't even think about that. Amazing.
A question from Laura. When scoring grassland quality using wax cat species, the various red species score highly. Is it known why they're rarer? Is it that they need more specialised substrate, or that the grassland needs to have been undisturbed or unfertilised for longer periods before they emerge? Or is it another unknown? I think it's like the plant life wax cap, double P.
Yeah.
You go round, you just look at the colours, and then you get a score for your bit of grassland according to what you've recorded.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a bit of a blunt tool, and I think that knowledge is still being formed. You know, you often get people speculating, and that their speculations suddenly sound like fact forevermore. So again, Emma will tell you that ballerina wax cap used to be thought of. She told me this only this week. You know, it used to be thought of would take decades and decades to establish. She's found it on coal spoil in the last on sites which are only 30 years old. So probably not as long as what we first thought. But some of the Splendissima and the Punicea have been considered to be species which would take 50, 60, 70 years to re-establish on a site which has either been ploughed or fertilized or heavily disturbed in some way. So that's why they are considered at the moment to be particularly important, because it takes such a long time to re-establish. Once you do damage to a site, it's very hard for it to retain its quality. But you know, we keep relearning so much here. I say these things with a slight sort of trepidation because I'm not sure if it's entirely true, but that's the best knowledge we've got. And there is a scoring system called the Chegg scoring system, whose acronyms I'm going to struggle with here. But they kind of account for the different types of grassland fungi, like the antilomas, the hygrocybe, the geoglossums, which are the earth tongs, all those sort of varieties of fungus. And there's a ranking system, and so you almost like, if you get like a splendid wax cap, that's 5 points. If you get a blackening wax cap, which is a more common one, 1 point, that sort of thing. But I think in the mycological world, people argue like mad about it, and I'm staying well out of that because I don't know enough to talk about it. So although I've played with the figures myself, I don't go into all that because I'm not good enough to know.
Quite a few years back now, we did have Gareth Griffiths do us a talk on fungi, and someone asked the question if, like you found at the Botanic Garden, where the fields have been fertilised, it's no good for wax cats, and they're appearing in the fields that haven't had artificial fertilizer.
Yeah.
But he said that it will recover over time, but it does take a lot of years. So it takes quite a lot of years for that added nitrogen to be used up. But eventually it will be used up if you don't add any more. But
well, Andrew, we're seeing at the Botanic Garden wax cats popping up now in places that I definitely didn't see them 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Now that could
so it's
be
that sort of time scale.
Yeah, and but there's also we had last year there was also a field where we'd always really heavily grazed. It's called Kai Kalk. It's where we put lots of cattle, lots of sheep, and it's always like really heavily grazed. And for some reason we were changing our cattle and sheep around, and last year it was very much undergrazed. And for the first time ever, we found crimson wax cap in there in quite good numbers. Never seen a wax cap in that whole field ever in 20 years before. And I think that might be to do with the trampling, because there was so little trampling in that field. These wax caps, which have probably just been cowered under the weight of the hoof for decades, finally sprung up. And do you know what? I haven't been there to have a look yet, because a lot of our the redder wax caps, they come out later in October. Actually, it should be about now, shouldn't it? It should be out now. So I think maybe next week I'll pop over and have a little look. But it was amazing to see them suddenly appear in a place I just never thought of looking before.
Yeah. There's a comment from Emma again about how they do this scoring system for the wax cat.
Yeah.
She says, I think the score is higher for red because there is a high percentage of red wax caps, but reds aren't the rarest. But I think since you're not identifying the fungus, because if you find a lot of red fungi, they're quite a lot of wax caps are red, so you're going to get a higher score.
Yeah, fair enough.
So you're just using colour to grade rather than identifying species. And she says Hygrocybe conica has a wonderful red form, and it's the most common.
Yeah, but a lot of things that Plant Life are doing, and they're there to just to raise awareness. You know, it's not like, you know, they're just to sort of get people interested, and maybe they may well alert other sort of more mycological expert people to then go and visit the site to go and check it out. This is what a lot of what we're doing, because otherwise, for people who've never done sort of surveys before, it's just a bit too scary when you get the book out and there's millions all look the same, and they say you have to look by a microscope. You know, people can often just like give up. So I think Plant Life are doing a really good job by just getting people interested. And this is how I started, you know. Like, I was scared at the start, but a few people showed me a few things and I just started to learn myself. And I think that's a really good way of carrying on in the future.
Yeah. Laura makes the point, thanking Emma for her point about the high score of red. The Chegg system gives red the same value, 5, as the rare violet coral.
Yeah.
Which is why she asked the question in the first place. Comment from Moira. Mynydd Epent is presently having its designation extended for its rare green slender feather moss, Haematocorylus vernicosus, but it also has 37 species of wax cat and 5 species of globally threatened grassland fungi.
Wow.
So that's
that again.
Mynydd Epent. EPYNT.
Okay. Oh, all right, Sunny Bridge, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
it's the MOD range.
Okay, so we might get killed to go and have a look, but
But it'd be worth it.
What a way to go.
I think that's all the questions that have appeared in the chat. Oh no, new ones just turned up. Let me scroll.
Okay, near the business centre. Thank you, Moira.
Oh no, you won't be killed because the field is really near the visitor centre.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think we've put Bruce's voice under enough strain now. It's been fascinating. Thank you very much for soldiering on while you got a bad cold. It's very good. And I'm sure I'm getting lots of good comments and thanks for your talk. So thank you very much indeed, Bruce.
And if anyone's interested, I'm giving a talk next Wednesday at 2 o'clock for Caring for God's Acre, which is all about graveyard fungi. If you
use your picture of the coral again.
Oh, I will be. There might be a few little gems from this one slipping into that one as well, I think.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, and thank you everyone else. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.